Jesus chooses to talk about who he is in the region of Caesarea Philippi, a city with a rich history situated about 30 miles north of the Sea of Galilee in a lush and beautiful area, known as one of the main sources of the Jordan River. In ancient times, the city was called Panias and was known for the worship of Baal and of idols. Later, the Greeks and Romans both built sanctuaries at Panias, marking the cave of Pan. Inside that cave was a seemingly unlimited source of water, and it was regarded as a mysterious place of revelation. Herod the Great was given the territory by the Roman Emperor Augustus and passed it on to his son Philip. Philip rebuilt the city of Panias and erected a temple in honour of the emperor. The city became known as Caesarea Philippi, or Philip's Caesarea. So Jesus chooses, as his place of revelation, a site associated with pagan worship and idolatry, rather than with Jewish traditions and the worship of God. He chooses a place symbolic of all that oppressed the Jews at the time, the seat of a puppet king who was prepared to kowtow to and even worship the emperor. It's a dangerous place to talk of Messiah and the future ambitions for the Christian church. Of course, Caesarea Philippi is known too as an abundant source of water, bringing fertility and growth. So it is too a place of hope and revelation. It would be easy to link Jesus' own revelation only with that aspect of the city. But I think maybe he chose the place because of all it represented. Maybe he wanted the underlying conflict between God and state, between truth and idols, between worldly success and God's way, to be a key part of his conversation with the disciples. When we talk about special experiences of God, we often talk about holy and beautiful places. But I think it's important that we're prepared to see God at work in less promising circumstances, in a dull work meeting or routine chores, in the corridors of government or the difficult decisions of rulers. I think it's important that we expect God's love and mercy to flood out and challenge us when we're distracted by power or wealth or novelty. This is me, Jesus says, against such a distracting background. You can still recognize my divinity. You can still commit to me. You can still accept salvation and choose God's way. The passage we heard isn't just about Jesus' disciples recognizing him as Christ, the Son of the living God, and accepting the gifts he offers. It is, in effect, a job interview for the position of church founder. As someone who's applied for several public sector roles recently, the process of appointing the church's founding leader seems strangely lacking. There's no specification of required and desired attributes. No prior experience required. No shortlist. No diversity policy. And just one question. Who do you say that I am? Peter is appointed as the future foundation of the church on the basis that he has received the wisdom to recognize in Jesus the divine Messiah come to save his people. Peter's sole qualification is that he can recognize the work of God when he sees it, he can see God in Jesus, despite Jesus' humble appearance and background, and despite the distractions of that new and shiny city, which must have been both fascinating and seductive for a fisherman more used to the shores of a lake. First century Rome would have held dangers and distractions similar to Caesarea Philippi, and Paul, writing to the Christians in Rome, stresses the importance of allowing God to transform them so that they could discern and know the will of God and recognize the work he had for them, whether that be prophecy, serving, teaching, encouraging, generous giving, or leadership. Paul urges the Roman churchgoers to conform not to the pattern of this world, but to what is good, pleasing, and perfect. It's that final word, perfect, which highlights for me the height of Christian aspiration and the scale of the challenge. Paul knows that proclaiming the Christian way in the establishment places and in the routines of daily life requires courage and a willingness to question, to delve behind headlines and local gossip, to look for truth and to seek justice. The Christian way is to allow ourselves to be discomforted and challenged as we seek to look with fresh eyes at the idols we worship, the histories we accept, and the rules and traditions we go along with. All very topical at this moment in history, where COVID has not only caused its own devastation, but highlighted inequalities which already existed, and in some cases at least, provided an all too convenient excuse for lack of action, rather than a further impetus for long-lasting change. The messages Paul brings are challenging, but he offers too a glimpse of the joy that trust in Jesus can bring, as he urges the early Christians to work together and to support and forgive each other cheerfully. Jesus really can be, for each of us, an abundant source of life, forgiveness, and love. If we open our eyes and seek truly to see where God is already at work in our world, and where God's transformative love is most needed, then we too can find him in the everyday challenges and in the big policy questions. We too can choose to let God into every decision we make and find that special peace that comes with acting in accordance with God's will. And we too can experience the wonderful joy and empowerment that living God's way can bring. I started this service with a question, and I end this address with two questions. Who do you say Jesus is? And where and how do you choose to say that and to live out God's truth?